Her heart raced as she stepped into the dress shop for one final fitting. Everything had been planned perfectly for months, the flowers, the music, even the smallest details of the wedding. Samantha Hayes had imagined this day countless times, dreaming of the moment she would walk down the aisle with Ryan Collins, the man she thought she would spend her life with. She had smiled at every challenge leading up to this moment, thinking the struggles were worth it for the joy that awaited her. But nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. Just 2 days before the wedding, Ryan called. Samantha had expected excitement, maybe nerves, but not the words that tumbled out of the phone. He said he couldn't go through with it. He claimed he didn't feel ready, that his life was too complicated, that he needed space. The excuses blurred together, but the message was clear: he was leaving her. Shock, disbelief, and a sharp sting of humiliation washed over her. She sank into a chair, the reality hitting harder with every heartbeat. All the plans, all the excitement, all the anticipation, it seemed meaningless now. Samantha's mind raced with questions. How could he turn his back after all they had shared? How could someone who promised forever just vanish when it mattered most? She felt foolish for believing in their love, yet the pain wasn't just about him. It was about being exposed to the world as someone abandoned, someone left to pick up the pieces while everyone around her waited for answers. Friends called to check in, their voices soft with sympathy. Her family tried to comfort her, but even their warmth couldn't erase the hollow feeling inside. Each conversation seemed to echo the same underlying question: why would he do this? It was the question Samantha asked herself repeatedly. She replayed every moment, searching for signs she might have missed, clues that could have warned her. Nothing made sense. The betrayal felt deliberate, as if he had planned it all carefully, choosing the day and the timing to maximize the pain. She couldn't stop thinking about the wedding invitations, the flowers, the dress that now hung untouched. Despite the heartbreak, a quiet determination started to grow inside her. She refused to crumble completely. The world had seen her at her most vulnerable, but she wouldn't let it define her. Deep down, Samantha knew this wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something she hadn't yet understood. For now, she allowed herself to feel every ache, every shock, every tear, but beneath it all, a spark of strength flickered. She had lost a fiancé, but she had not lost herself. Even in this moment of humiliation and grief, Samantha Hayes began to realize that life had other plans for her, plans she would soon discover were far bigger than she could have ever imagined. After Ryan left, Samantha shut herself in her apartment, avoiding calls and messages from friends and distant relatives. She didn't feel like talking to anyone. The betrayal had shaken her to the core, and she needed space to think and to feel. The apartment, once a place of comfort and excitement while planning the wedding, now felt empty and cold. Every corner reminded her of the life she thought she would have, the future she believed was secure, and the man she had trusted completely. As the days passed, Samantha couldn't help but replay their relationship in her mind. She remembered times Ryan had been distant, brushing off her questions or changing topics when she sought reassurance. She remembered the subtle lies, the moments he had promised one thing but done another. At the time, she had ignored them, convinced that love required patience and compromise. Now, looking back, those little signs felt like warning flags she had chosen to overlook. The clarity brought a mix of pain and anger, pain for the betrayal, anger at herself for trusting too easily. Her family noticed the change. Her parents tried to check in gently, offering meals and quiet conversations, but Samantha would only shake her head or smile faintly. They were worried, sensing how deep the hurt went, but they respected her need to process it alone. Occasionally, her younger sister would knock on her door, insisting Samantha eat something or take a short walk, trying to break through the walls she had built. Samantha appreciated the effort but wasn't ready yet. She needed time to sort through her emotions without anyone else's voice filling the space. The nights were the hardest. Alone in her bedroom, memories of shared laughter and plans for the future came rushing back, clashing sharply with the reality of his abandonment. How could someone she had trusted with her heart walk away without a second thought? How could someone who promised forever disappear at the moment that mattered most? The questions didn't have answers, and that lack of closure made the heartbreak sharper. Anger and disbelief started to mix together. She felt furious at Ryan, at his lack of honesty, at his cowardice. But she also felt something else, a quiet resolve. She couldn't control his choices, but she could control how she responded. In the midst of heartbreak, Samantha began to understand that this betrayal, painful as it was, didn't define her. It didn't erase the love she had for herself, or the strength she had built over the years. Samantha spent her days in quiet reflection, journaling, and letting herself feel everything fully. The heartbreak, the anger, and the disbelief coexisted with a growing awareness. She was stronger than she had imagined. Each thought, each memory, each tear was shaping her into someone who could survive this and rise above it. In the silence of her retreat, she was beginning to reclaim herself, piece by piece, preparing for whatever life had in store next. A few weeks after the wedding was cancelled, Samantha decided to go through her late Aunt Margaret's things. Her aunt had always been like a second mother to her, and Samantha wanted to sort through the belongings carefully, keeping some mementos and deciding what to donate. She didn't expect anything extraordinary, just old photographs, letters, and a few pieces of jewelry. But as she went deeper into the boxes in the attic, she found a locked folder tucked away in an old wooden chest. Curiosity got the better of her, and she carefully opened it. Inside were legal documents, property deeds, and appraisals. As she read, Samantha's eyes widened. Her aunt had left her a large estate in the countryside, a beautiful property with sprawling gardens and a main house full of character. But that wasn't all. The documents also listed a private collection of rare paintings, sculptures, and antiques. The appraised value of the collection alone was in the millions. Samantha sat back, stunned, her heart racing not from shock at the money, but at the weight of what this inheritance meant. For the first time since Ryan had left, she felt a flicker of hope, a sense that her life wasn't over. This inheritance wasn't just wealth, it was freedom. She could finally make choices for herself, live on her own terms, and build a life independent of anyone else's approval. The betrayal that had felt like the end of the world now seemed like it had opened the door to something far greater. She realized that Ryan had walked away blind, unaware of the life she was stepping into, unaware of the power she now held quietly in her hands. Samantha thought about the implications carefully. She could sell the estate, use the money to invest, or even keep it as a private sanctuary for herself. The art collection, priceless and rare, could provide security and opportunity. She imagined herself walking through the halls of the estate, seeing the paintings she had only read about in books, understanding the history behind each piece. For the first time in weeks, she felt excitement bubble up, a feeling she hadn't experienced since the betrayal. She also began to feel a quiet, almost satisfying sense of justice. Ryan had left her thinking she was vulnerable and powerless, and now she held something he could never have imagined. The thought made her smile softly, a small but powerful spark of confidence growing within her. She didn't need revenge through confrontation, her life itself had become a statement, proof that she could thrive without him. That night, Samantha sat in the quiet of her apartment with the folder open in front of her. She didn't rush any decisions, but she allowed herself to imagine the possibilities. Her inheritance had given her more than money, it had given her independence, opportunity, and the knowledge that she was capable of building a life of her own design. For the first time in months, she felt in control again, ready to take the next steps on her own terms, stronger and more determined than ever. A few weeks after discovering her inheritance, Samantha received a message from Ryan. He wanted to meet, claiming he regretted leaving her and that he wanted to talk. For a moment, her old emotions stirred, hurt, anger, confusion, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself that she was no longer the same person who had been left crying on the floor. She agreed to meet him, but with a clear mind and firm boundaries. They chose a quiet cafe, a neutral place where neither had the upper hand. When Ryan arrived, he smiled, trying to act casual, but Samantha noticed the slight hesitation in his eyes. He seemed unaware of the changes in her life, of the strength she had gained since their breakup. He spoke first, offering apologies, saying he had made a mistake, and that he had realized she was the one he truly wanted. Samantha listened quietly, her expression calm, betraying nothing of the whirlwind of emotions inside her. As he continued, trying to charm her, Samantha saw the arrogance and self-importance she had once overlooked. He acted as if he still held any power over her, as if leaving her had been his decision alone, and somehow, that gave him control. But she felt nothing but quiet resolve. She didn't need to argue, defend herself, or explain how hurtful he had been. She simply let her presence speak. Her posture was confident, her voice steady when she responded, and her eyes held a clarity he hadn't seen before. Without directly mentioning her inheritance, she shared updates about her life, new projects, opportunities she was pursuing, and the ways she was taking control of her future. Ryan tried to mask his surprise, but the tension was obvious. He realized she had not only moved on but had grown stronger, more composed, and entirely independent. Samantha noticed the small cracks in his confidence, and she allowed herself a private satisfaction. She wasn't seeking to humiliate him publicly, but the realization that she no longer needed him was a form of power all on its own. They ended the meeting without drama. Ryan left, thinking he had made some progress, unaware of the full extent of the life Samantha was now building. She watched him go, feeling no bitterness, only a calm sense of victory. For the first time, she understood that revenge didn't need to be loud or vengeful, it could be quiet, composed, and entirely self-contained. Her growth, her resilience, and her independence were more powerful than any confrontation. After he left, Samantha sat back, letting herself feel the relief and pride that came from reclaiming her space and dignity. She realized that facing Ryan was not about winning an argument, it was about showing herself that she could remain steady, confident, and unshaken, no matter how someone from her past tried to stir old pain. In that calm, she planted the first seeds of her silent, unstoppable revenge, one that would grow naturally from the life she was building on her own terms. With Ryan behind her, Samantha turned her full attention to the opportunities her inheritance had opened up. She began researching investments and business ventures she had once only dreamed of, carefully selecting areas where Ryan had always claimed dominance. Real estate projects, art auctions, and boutique ventures all became part of her plan. She worked quietly but with focus, determined to prove that she didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. Samantha approached each venture thoughtfully. She hired advisors to guide her on managing the estate and appraising the art collection. She attended auctions in person, buying pieces she had admired for years, and began networking with influential people in those circles. She wasn't doing it to impress anyone directly, she was doing it to establish herself, to build a life that reflected her intelligence, taste, and resilience. As her confidence and reputation grew, she started appearing at social events she knew Ryan might attend. She didn't flaunt her success loudly, instead, she let it speak through her presence. At galas, charity events, and business gatherings, people noticed her poise, the way she carried herself, and the knowledge she displayed about investments and art. Word of her ventures began to spread, and quietly, her influence and success became visible in the same circles Ryan valued. Meanwhile, Ryan, unaware of her inheritance at first, began hearing whispers about her achievements. Friends mentioned her name with admiration, colleagues shared stories of her sharp business decisions, and mutual acquaintances hinted at the impressive projects she was leading. Each bit of news chipped away at the arrogance he had once carried, making him realize how much he had underestimated her. Samantha never sought to humiliate him or gloat. She simply lived her life fully, letting her success speak for itself. Samantha also made strategic choices with her investments, choosing projects that mirrored Ryan's old ambitions but executing them in a smarter, more calculated way. She attended auctions he had once claimed as his domain, bidding on items with confidence, knowing he couldn't compete without realizing the depth of her knowledge and resources. Each success was a quiet reminder to herself that she could thrive independently and that his absence no longer mattered to her achievements. Every day, Samantha felt stronger. The heartbreak and betrayal had transformed into motivation. She no longer dwelled on what she had lost, instead, she focused on what she could build. Her wealth, her ventures, and her growing reputation weren't just material victories, they were symbols of her resilience, proof that she could rise above betrayal and create a life full of purpose and pride. By the time Ryan noticed the full scope of Samantha's success, it was too late. The quiet, steady way she had leveraged her inheritance, grown her influence, and built her independence had already set her apart. He saw clearly what he had lost, but Samantha didn't need to explain or confront him. Her life itself had become the ultimate, unspoken revenge, demonstrating that she didn't just survive heartbreak, she flourished because of it. As Samantha settled into her new life, she noticed a change within herself that no money or property could explain. The heartbreak she had endured no longer felt like a weakness, it had become a source of strength. Each challenge, each moment of doubt, had shaped her into someone more resilient, more confident, and more aware of her own worth. She realized that her growth wasn't just about success in business or social circles, it was about understanding herself and the power she carried as a person who had faced betrayal and refused to be broken. With this awareness, Samantha felt a pull to help others who had suffered similar pain. She began reaching out quietly to women in her community who had experienced heartbreak, betrayal, or abandonment. She shared her story with them, not for attention or admiration, but to show that it was possible to reclaim one's life and self-respect. Her advice was practical and heartfelt, grounded in her own experiences, and she encouraged them to focus on their independence, their goals, and their inner strength. Mentoring these women brought Samantha a new sense of purpose. She discovered that guiding others, offering support, and celebrating their small victories created a ripple effect of empowerment. Seeing someone regain confidence, step into their own power, or make choices that reflected self-respect reminded her of how far she had come. Each interaction reinforced her own sense of resilience, making her even more certain that she had grown into a version of herself that no one, not even Ryan, could undermine. Her personal growth became visible in everything she did. She carried herself with grace in meetings, at social gatherings, and even in casual settings. Her voice was calm but firm, her opinions respected, and her presence commanding without arrogance. People noticed it, often commenting on her poise and composure. Samantha realized that this quiet, steady confidence was more powerful than any confrontation she could have had with Ryan. It was a statement of self-worth and independence that spoke louder than words. Ryan, when he saw her at events or heard about her work mentoring others, began to grasp the full transformation. She was no longer the woman he had left behind, confused and vulnerable. She had become someone who moved through life with clarity and purpose, unshaken by past betrayal. Her strength wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense, it was about living fully, with dignity and grace, showing that she had grown beyond anyone who had tried to control or diminish her. Samantha understood that the true power she now possessed came from within. Her past heartbreak had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. She had turned pain into resilience, loss into opportunity, and betrayal into motivation. By helping others and embracing her own growth, she had created a life where confidence and self-respect were her ultimate weapons, and in that, she found a freedom that no one could ever take away. Over time, Samantha's name began to appear more and more in circles Ryan had once considered his own. Friends they shared, business contacts, and acquaintances he valued all started mentioning her accomplishments, her investments, and her growing influence. People spoke of her confidence and elegance, her ability to handle challenges with calm and intelligence. It was subtle, at first, small mentions in passing, but slowly, the pattern became clear. Samantha had not only rebuilt her life, she had become a presence he could no longer ignore. Ryan began to notice the change, though he tried to act casual at first. He heard about events she attended, the ventures she invested in, and the respect people now showed her. Each report cut deeper than he expected. He realized, painfully, that the woman he had left was thriving without him. He had once assumed he controlled the social and financial networks they both navigated, but Samantha had stepped in and quietly claimed her place among them, earning admiration he could no longer take for granted. The feelings that rose within him were complicated, regret, yes, but also jealousy. He regretted his decision to leave her, regretted the arrogance that had convinced him she would never succeed without him. But jealousy gnawed at him too, a recognition that she had surpassed expectations and proved herself far stronger and more capable than he had imagined. He watched from a distance as people sought her advice, invited her opinions, and celebrated her achievements. For the first time, he understood the depth of what he had lost. Meanwhile, Samantha remained unaffected by his awareness. She did not seek his attention or try to prove herself directly to him. She had no need for validation from someone who had walked away. Her focus was on her life, her projects, and the people she chose to surround herself with. She understood that Ryan's remorse did not change the past, did not erase the betrayal, and could not alter the strength she had built. She allowed him to grapple with his feelings while she continued forward, calm and undisturbed. At gatherings where Ryan appeared, he might glance her way, hoping perhaps for a reaction, for some sign of weakness or longing. But Samantha's composure never wavered. She greeted people politely, carried herself with grace, and engaged in conversations with confidence. Her detachment was itself a quiet message. The past had no hold over her, and his recognition of her success meant nothing to her sense of self-worth. Ryan's realization became painfully clear over time. She had moved on, thrived, and claimed her space without confrontation or drama. Samantha, meanwhile, knew that the power she held was not in making him feel regret, but in living fully and freely. His awareness of her success, his jealousy and regret, were irrelevant to her journey. She had grown too far beyond the pain he had caused to be touched by his feelings, and in that knowledge, she found a quiet satisfaction far deeper than any revenge could have offered. Months after she had settled into her new life, Samantha returned to her aunt's estate to sort through a few remaining boxes she hadn't touched before. While going through an old wardrobe in the back of a storage room, she found a small, intricately carved wooden chest. It seemed ordinary at first, but curiosity pulled her closer. When she opened it, Samantha's eyes widened. Inside were delicate pieces of jewelry, vintage watches, and several small, framed miniature paintings. Alongside them were letters from her aunt explaining the significance of each item. Samantha quickly realized she had stumbled upon a secret family heirloom collection of incredible value, something that had been kept hidden for decades. It was not just valuable in terms of money, but also historically and sentimentally. Each piece had a story, carefully preserved by her aunt, and it was clear that these treasures were meant to be her inheritance, a private legacy she could carry forward. The magnitude of it stunned her. This collection elevated her inheritance far beyond what she had initially imagined. For Samantha, this discovery wasn't just about wealth. It represented a chance to define her own path and create a lasting impact in a way that was entirely her own. She could establish a private museum, invest in cultural projects, or even use parts of the collection to support initiatives for women and young entrepreneurs, building a legacy that had nothing to do with Ryan or anyone else who had doubted her. The sense of freedom and purpose it gave her was immense, and she felt a deep, quiet pride in knowing that her life was now fully in her hands. Meanwhile, news of Samantha's discovery began to circulate among people who knew her story, eventually reaching Ryan. He couldn't believe it. The woman he had walked away from not only rebuilt her life but had done so with far more resources, intelligence, and foresight than he had ever imagined. He began to see that Samantha's world was far larger than he had considered, and that he had underestimated her in every way. The realization left him stunned, a mix of awe and regret washing over him. Samantha, however, remained calm. She didn't seek to gloat or draw attention to her newfound legacy. Her satisfaction came from knowing she had the power and independence to shape her future, to build a life that reflected her values and ambitions. She had turned loss into opportunity, betrayal into motivation, and now she held a treasure trove that allowed her to create something enduring and meaningful on her own terms. The discovery of the heirlooms marked another turning point for Samantha. It wasn't about revenge, it was about self-determination. She had the means and the vision to establish herself as a woman of influence and substance, untethered from the past. Ryan's shock was irrelevant to her. What mattered was that she had proven, to herself and the world, that she was capable of far more than anyone, even someone who once loved her, had believed. This secret inheritance gave her the final piece of freedom she had been seeking, a foundation to build a life that was completely hers. The night of the gala, Samantha carefully chose her outfit, a sleek, elegant dress that reflected her confidence without needing to shout. The event was filled with influential people, investors, and socialites, including Ryan, who she knew would be attending. She entered the room with poise, her presence calm yet magnetic, drawing attention without effort. Every step she took, every conversation she engaged in, radiated assurance and self-respect. Ryan noticed her immediately. He tried to act casual, pretending not to be impressed, but the moment he saw her, his composure faltered. She was no longer the woman he had left behind, uncertain, hurt, or dependent. Samantha's aura of independence and accomplishment was undeniable. People greeted her warmly, discussed her recent ventures, and asked for her insights on investment opportunities and cultural projects. Every interaction she had reminded Ryan of what he had lost, but Samantha remained detached, unaffected by his presence or his attempts to engage. Throughout the evening, she moved gracefully from conversation to conversation, effortlessly commanding attention with her intelligence, charm, and elegance. She smiled when appropriate, laughed naturally, and listened with interest, showing genuine engagement with others while keeping her distance from Ryan. There was no bitterness in her demeanor, no need to prove herself to him directly. Her life, her achievements, and her composure were the proof he needed to see. Ryan tried to catch her eye several times, hoping for some sign of vulnerability, but Samantha gave nothing. Her calm confidence spoke louder than words, conveying that she had grown far beyond any control he had ever imagined. Each glance he gave her reminded him that she no longer needed him or his validation. He realized, painfully, that no apology, no charm, and no regret could change the fact that she had built a life he could never be a part of again. As the night went on, Samantha's presence inspired others around her. She spoke with younger women, shared encouragement, and demonstrated that resilience and grace could turn even the deepest betrayal into empowerment. Her example quietly set the tone of the evening. Success and self-worth were far more powerful than confrontation or revenge. She didn't need to demean Ryan, call out his mistakes, or seek attention for her own pain. Her life itself was the ultimate statement. By the time the gala ended, Ryan left with a heavy sense of loss. He had watched Samantha thrive, command respect, and radiate confidence, all while he remained on the outside, powerless to affect her life. Samantha, on the other hand, left the event with quiet satisfaction, knowing she had achieved something far more meaningful than revenge. Her success, her elegance, and her independence had become the truest form of emotional payback. She had shown that the most effective way to overcome betrayal wasn't through anger or confrontation, it was by living fully, fearlessly, and with unshakable self-worth, proving that no one could ever diminish her again. Samantha sat quietly in her estate one evening, looking out over the gardens that stretched beyond the house. The memories of the past year, painful, confusing, and humbling, flashed through her mind. She thought about the day Ryan left, the heartbreak that had followed, and the nights she had spent questioning her worth. She remembered the anger, the disbelief, and the loneliness, but she also remembered the moments of clarity when she realized she could survive, could grow, and could reclaim her life on her own terms. As she reflected, Samantha understood that every challenge had shaped her into a stronger, wiser version of herself. The betrayal that once felt like the end had been a catalyst for transformation. She had discovered strength she didn't know she had, learned to trust her own judgment, and embraced the independence that had always been possible but had once seemed out of reach. The inheritance and the heirlooms had given her opportunity, but it was her determination, resilience, and intelligence that had allowed her to build a life that was fully her own. Samantha thought about Ryan. She realized that his regret and jealousy meant nothing to her anymore. Her victory was never about making him suffer or proving him wrong. It was about reclaiming her happiness, her confidence, and her sense of self. She had built a life where she no longer needed anyone else's validation, where her choices reflected her values, and where her strength was visible in everything she did. That understanding brought her a profound peace. She also reflected on the ways she had grown beyond material success. Mentoring other women, sharing her experiences, and helping them find their own strength had given her a sense of purpose that money alone could never provide. Her influence extended beyond the social and financial circles she navigated, it reached the hearts of those who had faced betrayal and needed guidance. In helping others, Samantha realized she had solidified her own confidence and resilience. Looking around at the life she had built, Samantha felt a deep sense of wholeness. She walked through her home, each room filled with reminders of how far she had come, the paintings she had preserved, the projects she had nurtured, the relationships she had cultivated. Everything reflected a life lived fully, intentionally, and independently. Samantha smiled softly to herself, knowing she had reached a point few achieve: freedom from the past, empowerment through personal growth, and a life defined entirely by her own choices. She had endured heartbreak, faced betrayal, and transformed it into triumph. Her journey had taught her that true strength lies in self-respect, calm resilience, and the ability to rise above pain without letting it define you. For Samantha, the future was no longer uncertain or controlled by others. She was whole, free, and empowered. The story of her pain and recovery would remain with her as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, growth, independence, and happiness are possible. She had turned betrayal into opportunity, heartbreak into motivation, and had emerged victorious, not through vengeance, but through the quiet, unshakable strength of reclaiming her life.